Good morning, everyone, again. I see some familiar names in the room, which is good, names from the field. This is the fourth and final EPRC webinar of this series. My name is Stefan Kahr. I'm a researcher at EPRC. Some of you will know me. It's great that you were able to come, and from all over the world, all over Europe at least, we'll see. And welcome you hopefully also in the future for future seminars. Today we welcome our presenter Miriam de Oliveira Gonçalves, who I hopefully pronounced more or less correctly. She will talk about examining local action groups as territorial development polities, CLLD, in the Lisbon metropolitan area. We'll have a presentation for about 30 minutes, then we'll have time for discussion and hopefully get a few good questions and some discussion going with the audience. If you would like to make an intervention, please use the raise hand function or write in the chat. After the presentation, then we will address all these points in the question and answer session. Before introducing our speaker, I would like to inform you that this meeting is being recorded, which means that you and your colleagues have the opportunity to follow the meeting at a later stage. And we'll make the recording available on the EPRC YouTube channel and share it also by email. We'd also like you to encourage to use Twitter, now X, or even BlueSky, if you're already using that, to share your thoughts on the webinar. Coming to our speaker, Miriam de Oliveira Gonçalves is a PhD candidate and a researcher at URBinLAB, which is Urbanism and Territorial Dynamics, and a member of the Research Center for Architecture, Urbanism, and Design of Lisbon School of Architecture. I had a chat with her yesterday, and it's interesting background. She lived in Sao Paulo, London, and now Lisbon, and worked as an architect and urbanist. For instance, she designed shopping centers, which I thought was quite interesting. And in a career shift in 2020, she started this PhD in urbanism. And I would now give the floor to Miriam, who can tell us about her research. So thank you, Miriam, and please, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank you for this kind invitation to talk, to present my work and to talk to such a special audience today. That it's always a wonderful opportunity to share insights about the CLLD instrument. So I will share my presentation. I hope you are seeing it. Okay, is that okay? Yeah.
Perfect, yes.
Okay,
excellent.
So this presentation today is part of my PhD research, and it's the result of an article that we published recently. The title is Examining Local Action Groups as Territorial Development Polities in the case of the Lisbon metropolitan area. So, as I believe, I don't need to talk much about CLLD. I think everybody knows about it, but it's a place-based bottom-up policy from the European Commission, and it's linked to a fund, to a financial resource, and this policy aims at promoting the empowerment, capacity building, and participation of local action groups so they can develop and implement their own development strategy. This policy is not new, as you know. It's an evolved version of the leader policy that was initiated in the 90s, in I think 1991. And it was initially only implemented in rural areas, and then it was expanded to coastal areas in 2007. And the novelty of this last programming cycle is that it began to be implemented in urban settings as well. So this policy, it relies on the mobilization and proactiveness and capacity of a local action group. My research focus especially in Lisbon metropolitan area, and is part of a project that we were developing at Lisbon School of Architecture that's called Soft Plan, which analyzes soft planning strategies and policies that are fostered by the European Commission in Portugal. So my research is a little part of that bigger project. This is the article we will share with you afterwards. And why do we say the CLLD is a soft policy? Because it's non-mandatory, especially for the rural areas. Okay, it's kind of mandatory to get that fund, but for the coastal and urban settings, the member state can adopt or not. So it runs in simultaneity with the statutory system. It has no predefined territory of intervention. The local action group will define the soft space of planning for the implementation of the instrument. And it relies on this constellation of territorial actors. They form this partnership, which is the local action group. That's composed by a variety of territorial actors, some of them from the public side, some of them from the private side. And here in this presentation, I have several images, and they are from these meetings, these encounters of the people and institutions from the local action groups. So just to give it a flavor of what it is about. The backdrop of the implementation of the instrument is the European process that has been going on for a while, that it can be explained as the influence that the European Union has over its member states. And it runs in two major dynamics. On the one hand, the implementation of these soft policies, that they emphasize the shift from government to governance that has been going on for a while, and its spatial translations, that they are the soft spaces of planning and soft planning strategies. And on the other hand, we have this growing emphasis on engagement, empowerment, and capacity building of local communities, especially when we talk in relation to social spatial justice. That's not different from social justice, but adding an additional layer of the spatial characteristics of the territory. So this emphasis on these people-centered and place-based policies that are tailored to the specifics of the territory and context are not new. It's not new. So it has been present in all this, in several international agendas, some from the European Union, some from the United Nations, such as the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, where we have the Sustainable Development Goals 10, 11, and 17, which are reducing inequalities, sustainable cities and communities, partnership for goals. Those are related to the participation, empowerment, and capacity building of local communities. For this article and for this part of the analysis of the CLLD, we detected four main concepts that are the multi-level governance, that is this relation that in the implementation we need to deal with several layers of governance and government. So I will show you in a bit, vertically and horizontally. Horizontally, it's all those actors that are part of the local action group. There is supposed to be it's supposed to be a rescaling of power and responsibilities from a top level of government to a local level, which is the level of this scale of the local action group. a performative imaginary has to be created for this soft space of planning. What is a performative imaginary? It's a vision for the territory and the way you create that vision, which happens in those workshops where the community gets together, the community, the associations that are partners of the local action group, they get together to create this vision. The spatial temporal fix, as per the definition of Harvey, it's the fixation of a financial resource into a local scale in this case. So those are translated into the projects that are financed through the local action group. And the local action group is this polity, which is a governance arrangement of stakeholders that have a collective identity. So that was I was talking about just now. So we have this translation of these concepts in the territory, the rescaling of power and responsibilities to the local action group, the interactions in the governance and government, the several levels that need to be coordinated, and the polity itself, the local action group, and the vision for the territory. And in the implementation, we have the spatial temporal fix, an investment that fixed in the territory, but it's temporary, as you know. It's Harvey would define that as it's a quick solution for a determined scale. So in Portugal, as you know, many of you know, there are the local action groups are very strong, especially in the rural settings, because they've been working for some decades. The coastal as well. The new ones, the babies, are the urban local action groups. In Lisbon Metropolitan area, there were 10 local action groups during this period of my research, which is the programming cycle of 2014-2020. And for the research, I had to choose 3 local action groups because I couldn't research all of them this time for this article. But what I tried to do is to have a balanced vision of the whole of the Lisbon metropolitan area. Some of you might have been here before, and you know, Lisbon metropolitan area is divided by the river Tagus, and the North Bank and the South Bank, even though they are very similar in terms of area and population, they have very different characteristics. So and then in the local, to choose the local action groups, I analyzed their agency in the territory, their importance in the territory, and I wanted to contemplate all the 3 typologies: urban, rural, and coastal areas. In the South Bank, it was possible to choose one local action group that I thought was if revealed to be the strongest in the area. And in the North Bank, I had to choose 2 local action groups because there wasn't one that would contemplate all the 3 typologies. Methodologically, I conducted 9 same structure interviews with all these levels of government and governance, and we conducted an online survey with all the partners of these 3 local action groups. And what we wanted to access with this survey, the idea was to create questions. We had 28 questions in this online questionnaire, but For this article, we are using 7 main questions that they are intended to check on those 4 main concepts: the rescaling, the multi-level governance, and the spatial temporal fix, and the performative imaginary. So in a simple language, I tried to get how it went in the implementation, how was the real problems, and not only problems, but the successes that we had relating to those concepts. Talking about multi-level governance, in the case of Portugal, we have a supranational level. All countries have that's the European Commission. We have a national level, that's the National Agency for EU funds. And we have managing authorities in the top level for the rural and the coastal local action groups. For the urban local action groups, we had a regional level, which I thought in the beginning, oh, it's going to be better because they are closer, the proximity is facilitated, but in fact, it didn't happen like I was expecting. So in the local level, we have this, the local action groups. Those in color are the ones we have chosen for the research. Talking about the multi-level governance in the horizontal, we have an example of this local action group, ADREPS, in the South Bank. We have here the composition. So what we can see, we have public, lots of municipalities. We have several municipalities in this local action group. From the private side, it's very heavily in the associations, agricultural, this one, it's more into the fishery industry. So, and some NGOs as well, and educational, public and private. So as you might know, of course, the local action group composition is very much related to the territory, which makes all sense when we are talking about a bottom-up policy. Here is another example in the north side, north bank of Lisbon Metropolitan area. This one, as you can see, has less municipalities, but it has more agricultural associations for the territory, and has even religious institutions and a financial institution as well. So this is very interesting. I think that's the beautiful part of the instrument. Talking about the soft planning and soft spaces of planning, here we can see the areas that are covered by this local action group, that they don't coincide with the statutory boundaries of the territory, the municipalities, they overlap. So it's really a temporary space for intervention. The same happens in the North Bank. We have these areas defined by the local action group according to the rules of the European Commission. I think that for that period, it's 200 inhabitants maximum. Here in this urban local action group, only acted in Lisbon Lisbon municipality, and the intervention was located in these territories that were previously detected as fragilized and vulnerable territories inside the municipality with communities, fragilized communities related to them. Here talking about spatial temporal fix and the results, the projects that were implemented. Some of these are the projects implemented by ADREPS. the local action group in the South Bank, that are some are small urbanistic interventions, investment in local businesses, and preservation of cultural heritage. In the North Bank, it was financed mostly by the social fund, so it's many projects giving support to these vulnerable communities in the territory for the period of 3 years in this case. Talking about the rescaling process, now we go back to those concepts that we mentioned in the beginning, the 4 concepts. Talking about this rescaling process, it really made sense to the partners, to the local actors, the instruments, and mobilized questions and ideas and that were crystallized into the local development strategy. The difficulties were more related to the urban local action groups because they were new in the, not that they were new in the territory, but the organization, the bureaucracy they had to deal with was completely new for them. For the rural and coastal, it was easier because they were used to dealing with that managing authority. They had built a relationship over time. So really for the urban local action groups was a learning process for both sides, for the managing authority in the regional level and for the local action group. Besides that, because it was during the post-pandemic period, the top-level government decided to standardize some predefined topics that had to be tackled with those investments that you know that with the local action group has access to. And that was a bit of contradiction because when we are talking about a bottom-up policy and place-based, it doesn't make much sense to have top-down measures for the whole country. So that was a bit of one of the main problems that the local action groups had to face. But even so, as this urban local action group partner mentions, that it was possible to finance projects on a micro scale, enabling projects of a local or regional nature, and to have a more homogeneous distribution of resources. Talking about the performative imaginary that's translated into the local development strategy, the partners really contributed with many ideas and projects that they would like to be financed, and they really were happy with the result of the strategy. Mostly in the rural and coastal areas, the partners were more satisfied with the acceptance of their contributions. The urban partners, it was because maybe they were too many. Some local action groups had more than 100 partners, so it wasn't so, they couldn't see themselves so much into the local development strategy. But even so, it's like this partner says, the problem is not the local development strategy, it's the means and the way the local action group can pursue it. So, talking about the implementation of the local development strategy and the spatial temporal fix that are the projects. For the rural and coastal local action groups, again, it was easier to see the projects implemented. The urban local action group had more, let's say, problems with the managing authority that wouldn't delegate so many powers or responsibilities to the local action group, the urban ones. Even the managing authority for the coastal local action group said that this regional level that was coordinating the urban local action groups didn't delegate so much and was somehow very, let's say, reluctant to give some power and responsibility more. The local action group had to deal with all the bureaucracy, but the latitude to really implement the local action group wasn't so big, let's say. Sorry about my English, I'm getting a bit confused, but I think you know what I'm talking about it. Summarizing, the problem was that when the instrument was translated into the framework of the Portuguese state, it somehow got misrepresented or distorted, because what was supposed to really be a bottom-up movement or organization ended up to be a bit top-down because of those measures that have to be tackled. So the transference of power and responsibilities was limited, especially in the case of the urban local action groups. Talking about the performative imaginary, the participation of the institutions and associations was quite substantial. And what happened is that it was hindered by the implementation is always the difficulties that everybody knows, that the European Commission knows, that the local action groups, the managing authorities, that the bureaucracy is quite heavy and create extra costs and delays. And it's always the complaint. And instead of the local action group being focused in implementing and helping the institutions, it sometimes loses lots of time and energy in this bureaucratic process. The top-down measures didn't help much either, but even so, with this limited investment that they had and all these bureaucracies and problems, the projects that were implemented they were really important, because 95% of these projects would not have happened if it wasn't for this investment. So it was really, like Harvey says, it really reached places, a local scale. The investment was fixated in a scale that it would never arrive otherwise. So it's really an achievement. So this is a bit controversial, but the main recommendation is somehow, I think you know that in the beginning, when the leader policy started to be implemented in the 90s, the interaction was more direct between the European Commission and the local action group. It wasn't, it was not as it is today, that has to be has to go through all this process of the member state, all the let's say, it gets entangled in these interactions of these many layers in the member state, which creates costs and sometimes, as Pedro might know about this, we gets into some not political, but particular problems that are in the member states, like we have here in Portugal. Some of the local action groups are having some problems now, and the urban local action groups are not being financed this programming cycle that we have now. So that's the recommendation. Is not that we are think that the state should be completely out of the process, but maybe an intervention that's smaller than it is today. And that's all for today. I know it's a bit, maybe it's too much to talk in one day, but I look forward for your comments, your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Miriam, and also excellent timing. So as you said, 30 minutes, and it was 30 minutes, probably only 28.
Oh, good.
No, really good. So we have still some time to discuss. And what you also said at the end, and that I think is the sad side of this, or the maybe disappointing side. You often said was and used the past tense because the urban CLD, at least the EU funding side, has been stopped. And that would be also interesting then for me to hear, but I'll leave the view to others first. What is the future of these urban structures that exist and will continue maybe, or not, or how do they? But we have in the room a number of people also that are, because I checked the list of participants, and from countries where there is also urban CLD, or where they are currently piloting or starting urban CLD, like in the Czech case. So maybe we can hear from also from them. But please, so any questions, raise your hand. And I saw some turned on the video. That's a good sign. And John, yes, please.
John.
Yeah, thanks very much. Good to see you, Miriam. And great that you were able to contribute the workshop after our discussion back in Florence. Really interesting presentation. I sort of have a question that is perhaps quite broad and maybe difficult to answer, but I think it's very topical, and Stefan might want to say something about this as well. And this is where the justification, if you like, for CLLD to continue in the next period after 2027. Because in her mission letters, the Commission President says to each of the commissioners, we need more citizen engagement. We need to get closer to the citizen. Democratic participation is important, and so on. And what you say from your research is that the initiatives are innovative. There is additionality. These projects wouldn't have gone ahead otherwise. There is mobilization of communities, of individuals, of stakeholders who wouldn't otherwise be involved. You also say it's problematic. We talk about being performative, institutional constraints, limited investment, and so on. One of the questions that the senior officials in DG Radio are asking, not just about CLLD, about ITIs as well, and so on, is what is the evidence that this is better local economic development? And by better, they mean evidence that they are making a difference in terms of local economic growth, in terms of, say, innovation, in terms of different metrics. And because much of the evidence is essentially about process, and that came through a little bit in your presentation. It's about better partnership, better stakeholder engagement, but the evidence is quite a little thin, particularly at EU level, about how you can justify it to skeptical people who are saying cohesion policy needs to be more effective in terms of promoting growth, promoting competitiveness, productivity, innovation, and so on. As I said, it's a difficult question, but I don't know if you've got any observations on that.
Well, the thing is, I had, when I started the research, I had the same concern, because here in Portugal, the evaluation of the instrument is based on the money that was invested. They invested this amount and this and this and this, but no one ever checked in depth the projects that were implemented. And I started to doing that for a second article. I'm going into depth into each of the projects that were invested, that received the investment. And the thing is, it's not only about economic growth. It's about soft outcomes that are like you are supporting a vulnerable community, for instance, here in Lisbon metropolitan area that has the biggest GDP of the country, but has these communities that are living in hardship, that the children cannot follow the school because they come from, they are immigrants, they cannot understand the language. So the local action group, for instance, this one, the one in Lisbon municipality, one of the projects supports those children, sorry. And it's something that's difficult to measure, but when you go and you talk to them, you see the value. So what I think it's the evaluation it needs to change, because it's not only about money or jobs. It's about creating cohesion in the territory in another scale. So if you look from the top, you will not gonna see that with data, only data, financial data or number of jobs. You need to get closer to see it. And that's what I'm doing now. So that's the way I found to really have a more clear evaluation of the process. Because here in Portugal, the projects received the investment for 3 years. After that, they have to somehow, if they want to continue, they have to find other sources of financing. So I think for those communities, those projects are really relevant. That's what I'm doing now, and talking to people, and another online survey. It's not here only the economic side, but this soft outcome. So I think the lens has to change. The way you look at it has to change. Instead of looking from the top, you have to go down and be there. I don't know. That's might be a bit different, but it's the way I think we need to analyze this instrument. It's not from the top. You have to go and talk to the citizens. If you want to be closer to them, you have to talk to them. That's what I think. So I don't know. It's a bit optimistic. Excellent. I don't know.
Yes, I might have mentioned this as a center. We've been involved in the ex post evaluation of the territorial instruments for DG Regio for 1420, which looked at all of those instruments, which are wide range and diverse ones. Also CLLD, the rural one, but also urban one. And there, and I see that Martin, my colleague Martin Ferry, just turned on the camera, so I think he's about to say something. But there we also saw that we tried also to identify added value. How do we capture these things because the criticism is there that, you could have done these things in mainstream funding. Why go through a local action group and create all these complications? Mm-hmm. But the fact that you mentioned one aspect was, just want to mention one, that it allowed reaching communities that have been excluded so far. And we saw this in a Romanian case, and I think also we saw this in the Portuguese case that we looked at, and we have our researcher who did this actually also in the room. But I think there's a lot, as you say, we need to look at in detail, and it's very difficult if this is aggregated at a higher level. You don't see these things.
No.
But yeah, but very interesting what you just said. Martin, did you raise your hand as well, or did you just turn on your? Was there anyone else who wanted to?
Sorry, Sam. Yeah, just turn it, but just kind of feeding in from our experience of doing the ex post evaluation. I mean, I completely agree with Miriam that we couldn't carry out the evaluation as a classic evaluation that's done under other cohesion policy studies and so on. We couldn't take that approach because John's right in saying a lot of it is about process, but then that was kind of the purpose of CLLD and ITI and so on, using this concept of place-based development to involve communities in strategy building and more decision making about investment that's happening in their territories and so on. And that's inevitably about the process. And this is what we focused on in our evaluation methodology. We kind of broke down the place-based concept into these organizing principles and saw on the ground to what extent they were being followed. And the issues that you, or the benefits and the challenges that you point out from your work, I'm sure you agree, Stefan, really echo the work that we found in our broader evaluation. I was just a specific question, and this would maybe be something that commission people would be interested in, was you said that 95% of the projects would not have been funded otherwise. Now, there is something that perhaps commission level people would respond to. How did you come up with that finding, Miriam?
Well, as I said, the online survey, I made this online survey with about 300 associations and entities that were the partners of these 3 local action groups that I was researching about. And I asked that exactly, did you have any project that was financed by the CLLD? And they said yes or no. Some of them didn't, some of them did. So, and from those I asked, and would this project have happened if it wasn't for the CLLD? And 95% said no, it wouldn't. Only 5% said yes, it would, because sometimes they had other, of course, they had other financially, but I think that was surprised as well. But yeah, but now I am, yeah, I'm it's the same as we were talking about. You cannot use a standard evaluation process for the CLLD. It's not gonna, because it's about social, what you are creating in the community, social inclusion. Those are things, how can you measure inclusion, social inclusion, all those capabilities is very difficult. I've been researching about it, how to measure these soft outcomes, and we'll see how it's gonna be. And I've been researching a lot about community development over time as well. And it's linked to democracy, because when you bring, that's from the research, when you bring the community to participate, you create, it's like you're creating a muscle, an intelligence about how to be in a collective way of thinking. So it's something that you build over time. It's why the rural and the coastal local action groups, they are very comfortable dealing with the instruments. And for the urban local action group, it's a bit new, and the institutions were not used to work together, and the managing authority didn't want to deal with them. So it's something that you build over time, and it's a pity that in Portugal they discontinued. It's a big issue here, and we are having big discussions this week about it, because it has, Pedro knows, it's in the news, and it's a big discussion in the city hall. And because the city hall, the state is not financing this urban local action group. And now the city hall doesn't want to finance either, wants to keep all the support. And then it's a big fight now, this moment. That's what's happening now. And it mainly is due to particularly, I don't know if this is a word, particularly. It's the problems between the left and the right, because the local action group was linked to the left, and now we have right wing in the municipality, and that doesn't make any sense for the community. Well, anyway, I don't know if I can talk about that or not. Okay.
Oh, very good. No, so very interesting. What you say, and I see lots of nodding echoes with what we found. And it's not something limited to the urban dimension. Also, as part of the ex post, we saw similar things about this. Would this project have happened otherwise? A similar question, a similar aspect. We saw it. I remember the Slovak case. Where we had a funding in a rural area about some wine technology. The entrepreneur failed to get any funding for years and almost gave up, and only through that suddenly was able to get a small scale support. And this also now then empowered him or allowed him to then give him experience, and then he could then apply successfully for other funding. But only through CLLD he got this opportunity. And we saw these cases. Maybe most, I think the one I remember most was the Romanian one, where we had a Roma woman who was able to get a little funding for a little business where she made little tools out of tin, or something very small scale. But she said it would not even let me into the door in this funding agency. It was not through the support through the local action group. So very interesting. Anyway, so yes, I would like to hear maybe also from people if you want to say something, but the ones from those countries that I see are in the room, because in some of your countries you have experience with urban CLLD or with other CLLD, or have just launched urban CLLD, like in the Czech case. Don't want to put people too much on the spot. But it would be great to hear from you if this, what you heard from Miriam, maybe echoes. No one's coming forward to ask. Pedro, please.
I don't want to talk on behalf of the Czechs, but as, let's say, European expert on CLLD for many years, working in LEADER, and then I've worked as the Portuguese expert for also your evaluation, and very closely with the EPRC and their different rural, coastal, and urban dimensions. Well, unfortunately, the experience in the last period having CLLD and other funds than rural development failed in Portugal, okay, for several reasons. But why are other countries still taking it up? I mean, that's the interesting question. And for me, it's because they had another process of slowly talking their authorities into the added value. It's a totally different thing. And then in Romania or in Bulgaria, you have really small projects, very small projects. I mean, these are, let's say, in rural, remote areas, the people are very poor and they can only do small projects. In Portugal, there's the habit, or they are used to get European funding. So it's kind of how do you say, it's the hunt after the European funds a little bit. And even if you look at all those different lags and coastal and so on, you will always find the same type of, not the same type of projects, but I mean, the system doesn't change a lot. While in Lisbon, and I think this is the interesting example with this network of working in very deprived neighborhoods with really small things, is something completely different. Has nothing to do with the local action groups that have been dealing with LEADER and that have a board and so on. So it's really, really very different. And of course, it's a pity that they didn't have the chance to participate in this CLLD in the right way. I mean, at the end, simply higher higher forces of the Portuguese government said no. In the next funding period, we are not doing again CLLD in the other funds. And so that's a little bit my analysis, that I think we still have a chance that in other countries where it's now being tested, like Czech Republic, Romania, and so on, we will come back at once moment in a few years where even the Portuguese will say, oh, why not? Maybe let's test it again. Of course, only if the European Commission still continues to support this in this way, let's say, and doesn't give up.
Yeah. The thing is, another question, what Stefan was talking, the local action groups, they will continue anyway, I think, with or without. That was the other question of the questionnaire. If they would continue without the CLL, the funding. And they said their answer it was yes, we will continue, because they have built something, some kind of relationship, and they will find all the ways to get funded. So this is a contribution of the instrument as well, that built something over time. So
there's a legacy. There is a legacy that's left,
exactly.
a valuable legacy. In a way, this is maybe even the Commission or someone could stand back and say, yes, that's what we want, because all these tools, they could argue, we don't want to fund leader local action groups and ITIs and so on for decades, forever. It should be just at the start and establish them into the domestic system, and then the EU funding leaves again, and then they operate on their own. It's a bit cynical. This was only one period, maybe, but I think in the end, one could say this is actually the fact that it survives without EU funding somehow proves the value of it. So it's
Yes.
somehow unfortunate in a way that it proves the point of you see, we can take the funny away and it still continue, but certainly not in the same way. But it's an
Yes.
interesting effect. Yeah.
Yes.
What coming to, we're still a few minutes. Your last slide had this conclusion or had this recommendation about, in a way, going back to the old leader, saying, allowing for more direct Commission oversight about to this, and limit the influence of the national level in basically having the ability to also stop it. I mean, one could argue that also traditional leader would not exist if there wasn't a compulsory allocation of funding. So 5% you have to invest every country, and then they do it.
Yes.
If this weren't there, maybe some wouldn't. So we could assume that is potential. So one way of ensuring a future of urban CLLD is creating a compulsory allocation. I mean, that might not be realistic, but do you think it would be helpful, or would it be something that, or would it create a more an attitude of, okay, there's a top pot of money, we have to use it, and then we'll find a system, and then they will be very unambitious? Do you think the voluntary character creates ambitious local action groups?
No, I think would be good if it was like the rural, it had a compulsory component. I think because that's what's happened here in Lisbon metropolitan area, because of the GDP of the Lisbon metropolitan area is higher than the other areas of the country. It seems that here we are richer here and better, but there are those neighborhoods that are really struggling. So, and the funding from the European Commission was smaller for Lisbon metropolitan area, and they decided not to fund the urban CLLD. If there was other way of analyzing a country as well that wasn't GDP, that would be helpful as well, because it's misleading, I think, in the case of, and there is a discussion about that, about poverty in high-income countries. You don't see it when you see only data. And it comes up in the discussion about community development in general as well, because the poverty is hidden, and the importance of the instrument, it seems it doesn't matter. And then the city hall said, oh no, we're going to help you in another way. But then it didn't. So it's, and then the thing, coming back to the more direct interaction with the European Commission and the instrument, it's because then we could avoid this partisan thing as well, that it's really bad for everybody, because it's not fair, and it's, I don't know. You know more about leader. Who said that? That mentioned that was the managing authority for the rural, managing authority of the urban CLLD. He said when it was the direct from the European Commission, it was easier. It was less bureaucracy, less costs. The local action groups could have more freedom and more creativity. So, and I thought, oh yeah, that makes sense, because it's not that I want to hollow the state, hollowing out of the state. It's not that. It's not in a new liberal vision. It's just how can we make it simpler? You know,
it's maybe more about the readjusting the multi-level system.
Exactly.
We fully accept it's multi-level. We have all the levels that should be involved and have some influence and some role in that, but maybe rebalance it.
Exactly.
We could call for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're coming to an end. Is there anything else one wants to raise? Pedro, because you can also maybe talk about leader, because he is the leader expert.
Just a very last remark to Miriam, because I didn't even address her. Well, thank you very much. This is really interesting research, and thank you very much for the presentation. And the first thing I thought, okay, finally, someone is also making some research on CLLD in a metropolitan area. Because I'm also working now in the spatial planning department here in the regions of Berlin and Brandenburg, and we are representing the metropolitan region, capital region of Berlin and Brandenburg, which is the whole of Brandenburg. In the middle, there's a big Berlin, in metrics and in other networks and so on. And now I'm very interested to see what is the role of CLLD in these metropolitan regions, seeing that the metropolitan approach is not something that is, let's say, inherent of the cohesion policy itself. So that's one thing. But I think that would be interesting. This could be, let's say, a test, let's say, to say how did CLLD work in the metropolitan region of Lisbon, and what does, let's say, the authority in charge of this metropolitan governance, which is there for the Lisbon metropolitan, what do they say about it? At the moment, they probably don't say a lot. They know that these things are happening and so on, but could be interesting.
No, the metropolitan authority, it's only they were informed about the CLLD, but they didn't have a say in the map.
Yes, exactly. And there's not really a link. They are developing a bit food strategy, for example, interesting things that are also linked to these social, but you know, it's not that clear. But I mean, we don't even have a proper analysis of the interaction between ITI and CLLD.
No, we have there are no interactions.
No, but this would be something the European Commission would have to start to work on at one moment. But it's not, because you know, CLLD in not being leader is like not, let's say, treated very well or worked on as it should. But I'm quite hopeful that with those countries where you have strong movements like in Czech Republic and so on, where they know how this should look like, what should be the governance of urban CLLD. They know that. I think in Portugal, they didn't know that. They said, oh, finally we get some funding. We are doing community development anyway. But to implement a heavy system like a local action group with all these principles is not really that easy too. So it was, of course, easier for EPRC to found on top of their rural and their coastal leg another urban leg for their urban territories.
For them was
a result of the story, let's say. Okay, sorry, I didn't want to take too much
No,
of
but it's,
your time, but
it's-
it's an interesting discussion. I
yes.
think.
Yes.
Yes, we can invite you, Pedro. Do you want to give in the new year? We can have a seminar, and we can have it maybe with a few contributors and have a seminar on, let's say, the diverse geographies of CLLD and look at these that or something like that. But I don't know. That's just
Why not?
ideas.
Let's talk about it.
Let's talk about it. Yes, we'll already be it's after 12 here, well, after 1 o'clock where you are. So thank you, Miriam, for this great presentation and for taking time to present your research. And thanks for everyone who came and joined us and contributed to this. I think this is the last one of the year, as I said. And next year, there will be more seminars. And if you're not on the mailing list yet, please get in touch and put you there. And hope then we'll see some of you again next year. Did I forget anything, Marina? Excellent.
Thank you,
Good.
thank you all for listening to me, and I hope to see you all very soon. Okay.
Certainly in some context. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.